There is a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world, and that's why I am on the trail of a NEPHILIM. The Genesis 6 narrative states that the NEPHILIM are on the earth in those days and also afterwards. If that's true, can we find evidence that corroborates this? I'm L.A. Marzulli. Join me as we go on the trail of a NEPHILIM. We're going to be talking about elongated skulls, some archaeological papers, which I'll read to you and show you. I think you'll find it interesting where I'm going to go with this. But thanks so much for watching. We'll get into this. But first, a word from our trusted sponsor. Folks, the U.S. dollar has lost 85% of its value since the 1970s, when the dollar decoupled from gold. And the government seems bent on continuing the tradition. From now until after the next elections, the government can print as much money as they want. The last time they did that, inflation went up 9%. This can only mean one thing. The security of your future and your family's future is all in your hands. Make sure you freeze the value of the wealth you are holding. Invest in gold with Noble Gold Investments. Gold is the one asset that has been proven to withstand recession, inflation, and just about all economic threats. Noble Gold Investments is here to help. If you want to invest in gold, you will also get a 24-karat, quarter-ounce gold standard coin for free. Folks, go to Noble Gold Investments or call 877-646-5347. That's 877-646-5347. It's the only gold company I trust, and folks, we have invested in gold ourselves. So this is from the Archaeological magazine. It's online. I look at this from time to time to see what they're throwing up to the public. 1,800-year-old skulls from Japan studies. So we'll read the article and then we'll kind of walk through it. One of the skeletons belonging to the Hirota people that was unearthed from a site, and you can see it right there on Tanagashima Island. So there's the skeleton. It was unearthed, and I'm going to scroll down here. These posts are where they actually found the skeletons. It reminds me of Catalina Island a little bit. You'll notice the beach right here and the ocean behind it. I mean, the setting looks absolutely incredible. And we know that Ralph Glidden was out there in 1919, 1921, digging up the same type of thing. And what he found there was unbelievable, but I digress. The Hirota people resided on a southern Japanese island between the end of the Yaoi period and the Kufun period. These are obviously cultures, and this is how they're rated. And I probably butchered the pronunciation of that. I've never really delved into Japanese archaeology before, so let's see where it goes. Between 1957 and 1959, and later between 2005 and 2006, researchers excavated numerous skeletons from a Hirota site on the island and found that most had deformed skulls. We've seen this before, so what are we really looking at? Until now, it was unclear if the skulls had been deformed by an unknown natural process or deliberately misshapen via a process known as artificial cranial deformation. So that is when you take a skull of an infant and you bind the skull, wrap it, put wood. So you take the skull and here's a wood plank, and you bind that skull to the wood plank. And of course, as the child grows, the skull is misshapen. This is child abuse, but I digress. So artificial cranial deformation, which normally involves wrapping or pressing an infant's skull to change its shape shortly after birth. Artificial cranial deformation is also known as intentional skull deformation. However, this term is used less often, as most individuals do not make this decision themselves. In a new study published Wednesday, August 16th in the journal, researchers reanalyzed the skulls and compared them with Japanese remains from the same time period. The results indicate that artificial cranial deformation is the most likely explanation for the contorted craniums. The most likely. but it's not conclusive. So there are two pictures of the skulls, a comparison between the Yaoi skull on the left and the Hirota skull. Obviously, the one on the right has much more flattened area in the back of the head. We know that. Researchers believe this shows it has been deliberately modified. That's certainly an explanation. What always bothers me about this is they never show us what the foramen magnum looks like, but we'll get into that. The research team analyzed the overall 2D skull shape and took 3D scans of the bones. Then they compared the skulls with those from the Yaoi and the Yeoman peoples who occupied other parts of Japan around the same time. All of the deformed Hirota remains had been altered to create a slightly shortened head with a flattened back of a skull. The analysis revealed very similar damage to the occipital bone at the base of each skull and showed depressions in parts of a skull that connects the bones together. Study-led author Noriko Seguchi, a biological anthropologist at the Kyushu University in Japan, who said in a statement an equal number of male and female remains were deformed and there was no difference between the sexes in the shapes of the skulls. Similar deformations were not observed among the other skulls. The distinct morphology, the structure of the Hirota skulls strongly suggests intentional cranial modification. That may be true. I have not examined the skulls, so I don't have all the information. This is where I want to go. It's unknown why the Hirota people chose to alter their infant skulls. One possibility is that it helped them distinguish themselves from other groups, the researchers wrote in a statement. Okay, that's a possibility. That's conjecture. I understand that. The team plans to examine more archaic deformed skulls from the region to gain further insight into why the artificial cranial deformation was carried out. Evidence of artificial cranial deformation has been uncovered in many groups throughout history, including the Huns, medieval European women, the Maya, some Native American tribes, people from the ancient Paracas culture. Now you can see why we're doing this. And what is now Peru, whose exceptionally elongated skulls have been misconstrued by conspiracy theorists as evidence of aliens, reported in a 2022 feature on artificial cranial deformation. What I want to get into here is this. This is one of the elongated skulls from Peru. We took DNA from this. The DNA from this skull showed a Middle Eastern connection. Mainstream archaeologists will insist that it's all contaminated. It's not. We took 56 samples. Our protocols were very stringent. Mondo Gonzalez and I wore full lab suits, head-to-toe lab suits, double gloves, double sleeves, face masks, hairnets. After each skull that we looked at, we went out of the room, changed out of those lab suits, put on new lab suits, blew each other off with compressed air, walked in. We then turned the skulls over, and right here where the foramen magnum is, this is where we drilled. Took fresh material with a Dremel tool. That material fell onto a plain piece of white paper. The moment it was done, we creased the paper, folded it, and tapped all that sample powder into a tube or a packet, which was then immediately flagged and tagged by Chase Klotsky. Richard Shaw was our videographer on that film. What they never show us is the position of the foramen magnum. I'm going to zoom in here, John Adam, because I have to. So just give me a second. So once again, here is the skull. And you can see, let's look at some of the morphological features. First of all, the orbits are 25 to 30% larger than a normal human being. 25 to 30% larger. Look at the zygomatic arch right here. Very, very pronounced. Extremely pronounced. Look at the robust jaw that we see. And I'll turn it back so you can see the zygomatic arch again. You'll have to cut this. So here's the pronounced zygomatic arch. And you'll notice the very large, oversized, robust jaw. Also here, there should be a suture. These are the sutures that create the difference between the plates. There's the frontal plate right there. It should have a suture going from the frontal plate all the way back to the occipital plate, which would then take these parietal plates and cut them in half, but we don't see that. We don't even see the vestige of a sagittal suture here. It's not there. Look at the sutures in the rear. But the smoking gun, and I challenge anybody to come on the show and talk about this. Here is the foramen magnum right here. There's the foramen magnum. That foramen magnum is all the way to the rear of the skull. If it's any further back, it's outside the skull. See that? If it's any further back, it's outside the skull. This foramen magnum should be here. Should be in the center of the skull to give the skull a balance. See that? It should be like right there to balance the skull like a normal human being. That's a good shot of it right there, John Adam. But that's not what we see. What we see is the foramen magnum has been pushed back as far back as you can. So my query to this particular paper, where is the foramen magnum? Because the foramen magnum on the Hiroto skulls are here, then I would certainly agree. Cranial deformation was then practiced. This elongated skull from Paracas, Peru, in my opinion, is not the result of cranial deformation. This is something that is genetic. So there you have it. And our film on DNA, which is On the Trail of a Nephilim, it's number 6 in the series. You can go to that site, streaming at lamarzulli.net, streaming.lamarzulli.net, streaming.lamarzulli.net. Rent that and watch it. We have archaeologists, anthropologists, we have medical doctors, we have surgeons, we have optometrists, we have chiropractor that comes on the film. In the beginning of the film, what we are looking at is a genetic anomaly. And the fact that the DNA from these skulls that we sampled in Paracas show a Middle Eastern connection rewrites history. It does. I challenge anybody to prove us wrong. You cannot move a foramen magnum that's done in utero. You cannot move the position of that. You can cradleboard that child till the cows come home. You can't move the foramen magnum. You'll kill the child. And the foramen magnum, once again, that's where the spinal column attaches to the skull. In the Paracas skulls, we see that the foramen magnum is moved all the way to the posterior of the occipital plate. If the foramen magnum is moved further back, it's outside the skull. And in our film on DNA, we show, and right now we're the only people that have ever filmed that. The elongated skull from Chongos, we turn that thing over, and the foramen magnum is all the way to the back. So what are we looking at? What is the truth? The fact that the DNA evidence points to a Middle Eastern connection is very telling. The fact that the foramen magnum is pushed all the way to the rear of the skull, all the way back to the occipital plate, the rear plate of the skull, is very telling. And then, of course, we've got these other genetic anomalies. So before I go, this is a film that was taken in the 50s. It's in our very first film, On the Trail of a Nephilim. It shows the skulls unearthed on Tick Island. Tick Island was this island in Florida. And the gentleman who gave us this footage, I was very hopeful that we would see a giant. He reported digging up 9 and 10 footers on the island. When the archaeologists got there, he wasn't interested in that. He started digging up this. So here's the clip. Check it out. And once we get to this, I will stop the film and show you right there. There's the elongated skull. See my arrow? Look at the elongated skull. Unfortunately, the camera is focused on what the archaeologists are looking at there. But what intrigued us was the great elongation that we find here. Is this a result of cranial deformation? It might be. Then again, it might not be. There it is. What amazes me about this is, I'll just stop it right there, is that anthropologists and archaeologists are all too quick to lump everything into cranial deformation. Let's turn the skulls over and let's look where the foramen magnum is. And then from there, we might be able to really come up with some explanation. Because if you can show me how you move the foramen magnum, you can't. In a human being, it's dead center of a skull. It happens in utero. In other words, when that child is in the womb, that foramen magnum is formed. It's in the center of the skull. It's not all the way to the posterior of the skull, not pushed back into the occipital. So I think you'll find that interesting. Anyway, folks, October 5th to the 8th, I will be at the Imminent Return Prophecy Summit. There are those of us who are wondering whether we're in that window of time of the rapture of the church. And I, for one, think that we might be. I will be doing a UFO update as well as the newest film in the Armatrail series, which will be released soon. Josh Peck has done a wonderful job in taking my rough edit and polishing it. Thank you, Josh, for doing that. Really appreciate it. And that's Armatrail of a Nephilim. It's number 8, Out of Place Artifacts. And I'll be speaking on Out of Place Artifacts at my presentation, as well as a UFO update. Don't forget, folks, we have a couple of seats left on the Spiral of Life tour. A couple of people just dropped out, medical issues and what have you. You've got to be able to walk a mile, and we'll be talking more about that, but that's coming up and looking forward to that. I will be leaving from the return at the Prophecy Summit in Oklahoma. I will be flying into Atlanta and then from Atlanta over to Israel. Hope to see you there. Don't forget the cattle mutilation film will be coming out next week. We will be shipping. The pre-sale is still on. You can save yourself $5. It will be up on streaming fairly shortly. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget, Further Evidence, the book will also be out in the coming months. And of course, our UFO Disclosure 5-disc DVD set. Thanks so much for watching On the Trail of a Nephilim. Remember, there is a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world. And that's why I am on the trail of the Nephilim. And folks, if you watch this show, you're on the trail too. Thanks so much for watching.
By jingoes, it's amazingly fresh and clean out here in beautiful New Zealand. G'day America, I'm Tabi, and I want to tell you about my new ultimate stain and odour remover, Jingoes. My Jingoes gunk gobblers will tackle stubborn organic stains and eliminate nasty stinking odours at the same time. Jingoes effectively removes those little accidents like wine, coffee, dirt, blood, grass, even pet stains, and odours like fish, garlic, even skunk. Jingoes is environmentally friendly, safe for use on fabrics, carpet, upholstery, and it works great as a laundry pre-soak on the worst pet or people accidents. Come on America, what are you waiting for? Just go online and order your Jingoes for $12.95 and get a 4-ounce travel pack free. Crikey, pay $19.95 and I'll double your order. That's 2 large Jingoes and 2 travel packs for just $19.95. Blasted seagulls, where's my Jingoes?